Hey everyone, welcome to my post-game analysis of my semifinals match and my skirmish. We actually did have a finals match, however, it was me who actually won this round and another opponent who was also an Iyslander that I beat in Swiss, and we just decided to prize split and just kind of call it a day. But I still wanted to give a post-game analysis on this match because this was the one I recorded from top 4, and give some thoughts, show some lines, and just kind of explain how I'm playing into Wizard. So I'm going second because my opponent was a higher seat than me, so they choose to go first to get an arsenal, which is pretty important for Iyslander. So if you have the choice, obviously going first is ideal. You deny them an arsenal, and you can arsenal yourself and hope to hit an item turn 1, which is always really good. So my opponent just opens up a blue Voltic Bolt. Obviously, we're going to be paying for this. We have Arcane Barrier 3 running Invisitronic Model I instead of Arcanite Skullcap. Some Icelanders do run attacks, sometimes disruptive attacks like Command and Conquer, things like that. But normally it's safer just to assume that they're going to be playing an arcane focused build, because you don't want to get caught out with only having like one arcane barrier into Iyslander. So in terms of how we want to play out this game, we're mostly looking to slow roll our hands so that we're able to keep as much information from our opponent as possible. Most of the reason for that is if we overextend our hand and we have no resources to pay and our opponent knows this, they may choose to take the damage and to instead sort of combo off or maybe play multiple arcane damage spells that will be unblockable on our part. And we have to be really careful about that. We want to keep ourselves above 11 life at all times throughout a match because of Stir into Forked combo, which is 14 damage from a single target. So even through Arcane Barrier 3, if you're at 11, you'll still die. So we just open up with a 0 cost attack, so red 0 to 60, which is buffed by Teklo Pounder, so it comes in for 6 with Go again. My opponent chooses just to block with Skullcap. And so this is kind of interesting. If we had a blue, we would probably just not overextend our hand this much. However, our hand was, I believe, all reds and yellows, or I think maybe 1 yellow and 2 more reds. I think the card that I end up arsenaling is a red Overblast, so I have to be careful, and I'm just trying to draw cards out of my opponent without overextending too much, which includes me using Foundry Heart here, which will close the chain and they'll get 1 more block out of Skullcap. But into Iyslander, they're going to be a lower life total, so you'll probably assume that they're going to get all 3 points of value from Skullcap every game. Another thing to consider, though, is that normally it's pretty bad for a Wizard player to be using Storm Striders when you're at 20 life. Their ability to combo off without that card is extremely difficult, and especially for Iyslander that can only play 1 card from Arsenal at instant speed. Other than that, they have no other ways really to do instant speed effects. Kano can still pay 3 to banish the top card from the deck, but once Storm Striders are gone, it's a very, very easy matchup to play around. So I am okay with overextending a little bit at 19 here because the chances of my opponent breaking Storm Striders are pretty low, and even if they do, it'll be significantly harder for them to win after that. So you can also expect a lot of times that better Wizard players will probably choose to play on their own turn rather than yours. It mostly goes for Kano, but it's also applicable for Iyslander as well. So our opponent comes in with Fire Breathing, and this is actually really interesting. Basically a line to think about because we have lethal in our hand here, especially with our opponent going to 9 on the first turn. It's very easy to get lethal at this point. Our hand has the ability to do so. However, we can just throw Teklo Foundry Heart in front of it, and you're probably asking why this is a tough decision. Well, the thing is, my opponent has 2 cards in hand and 1 floating in their pitch zone. And so I thought about, like, okay, if I assume my opponent has the best hand possible for this moment, they have 2 blues and they have 1 resource floating, so they have 7. And Fire Breathing, you can pay 1 resource at instant speed, and then it'll increase its power by 1, or its attack by 1. So if they have 7 resources, they can make it come in for 10, which means that if we block with Foundry Heart, we take 8, which, if going back to what I said earlier, puts us in the 1 breakpoint into Wizard you don't want to be at. So now we're exactly at 11 into Wizard, which is a really, really bad spot to be in. And so, because then we're dead on the spot to any sort of Lightning Stir combo. And with our opponent running Metacarpus and Crucible, it's actually pretty reasonable. They've kept a card in Arsenal for a whole turn now and didn't play on our turn, so I'm thinking about that as a possibility. However, they've only had, what, 2 hands this game. This is turn 2 now. So I was kind of okay with risking it a little bit and just kind of saying like, all right, I'm going to make you have the full combo assembled on turn 2. However, there's probably a case that we could have maybe just put them extremely low on their turn and maybe thrown 1 extra card in front. But there's also a chance that they didn't have 2 blues here, which was actually the case. But I still wanted to play around them having the worst case scenario hand for us, which would have been buffing it all the way up to 10 and putting us to 11, which is a spot you don't want to be in. So you can see me kind of deliberating over whether or not to play that card. In the wizard, you're pretty much going to be committing as few cards as possible from hand to draw things out of their hand. And if they choose to block, even if they block with like 1 or 2 cards, normally it's going to be much more difficult unless if you're at extremely low life total for the wizard player to kill you on the spot. So after that happens, you're pretty comfortable then kind of overcommitting your hand, as long as you're at a higher life total like this. I mean, like we're at 19 and we go to 14, right? So at 14, even the perfect like forked combo is like shut down by like any pitch from our hand. We're able to survive. So at this point I'm like, okay, I can really overextend my hand, but what's important is that I need to get cards out of the wizard player's hand as soon as possible so that I know that I have lethal, so that there's basically insurance for me overextending on a hand that's going to do lethal. And for into any other deck, you're fine overextending like this. Obviously you want to like do everything you can, but in the wizard it is a little bit more tricky. So I open up with Goliath Gauntlet into red throttle with boost because it's exactly 10 damage, which means that even if they block with Tunic, they've already used Skullcap twice, but if they block with Tunic, they're still dead. So they have to at least commit 1 card from hand, or they have to combo off on the spot. And so now we still have 2 cards in hand and we have access to Arcane Barrier 3. And so this was really intentional that I opened up with a stronger attack. Into some other decks, sometimes it's actually better to start with lower attacks. And, you know, if they're at 9 and they think they can do 14 back, then maybe they take 5 damage off of a zipper hit, right? But then you come in with a throttle for now 8. And all of a sudden they have to poorly block it out, and now they're going to be on the back foot for the rest of the game. But into wizard, it's normally better to commit as few cards from hand and to play the bigger thing first, so that you're able to either draw cards from them or have them go off in response. You're able to pay Arcane Barrier, and then they have no cards left in hand, and then they just die to the attack anyway, because that's another thing to consider as well. And so that's pretty much how we'd be playing it. And you'll see here, you see red stir and forked, which is pretty great that we were able to stay at 14, right? If we were too low, our opponent would probably just combo off in response with that, and we would probably just die on the spot. So with that, we know we can overextend our hand here. We're fine getting rid of anything. There's no way for our opponent to do 14 damage to us at instant speed with 2 cards. So at this point, I'm fine basically playing out my whole hand into them. There's nothing I'm really concerned about. Blizzard is something to consider with Iyslander. However, if they do blizzard you, you can choose not to pay 2 if you don't want to. You will get the frostbite, but you can actually activate Achilles to get an action point back. And so you can actually lose go again and just use Achilles to get through blizzard, which is probably the hardest thing in this deck. So you'll see here we go red throttle for 10 into blue zipper hit for 2, and then a red overblast for 7. And so this is great. This is another lethal attack that's going to get a card out of their hand. And even if it blocks for 3, they'll be taking 4. And then we have Achilles and a resource floating, so we can come with the pistol, and they'll be at 1. And so we'll get them even through Tunic, which is exactly what happens. So, yeah, so that was just, it was a pretty quick game. There's really not much to discuss. I mean, we just like had a ton of damage, and the Iyslander player wasn't able to assemble the combo before we were able to just pressure their whole life total. But I still think it's important to think about how to play out your hands in a wizard without committing too much, without giving away too much information, and to try to draw information from them through them blocking or comboing in response. So yeah, I hope this video was helpful, and good luck.